Hello everyone, my name is Sarah Vella and I am the Senior Data Manager with Meridian and the Lead Data Manager and Developer on FishSounds. Today I'm going to do a high-level technical walkthrough of how our tool is built. FishSounds, the website, exists within a larger system of external and legacy data, processing tools, and some additional data endpoints. Today I'm just going to focus on the website itself and how it delivers data to the end user. Alright. So version 1 of the site, which is what you would find if you went online right now, is just a read-only site. It just pushes data out. It doesn't accept any new data to be submitted. It uses what's called an MVC system. That stands for Models, Views, and Controllers. This is kind of just a standard design in modern tech. It's not anything particularly novel, but it's what we've employed. So the models define what a data set should look like, what fields should be there, and whether they should be of particular, this should be a date and this should be a number. It lets you keep the data nice and structured and clean so that it's really usable for the rest of the site. Views define what a page should look like. They provide little templates into which the data gets plugged. And then the controller makes everything work together. So to walk you through how this would kind of work in reality, so if a user submits a request, that gets passed off to the controller, and then that will parse what the request is and which files should be pulled from the rest of it. So it'll pass the things to the right model based on what it's requested. So in this case, it would be off to the fish model. If it's provided an ID, then it knows it's looking for a particular fish, and then the model would pull that. It might also be looking for all of the fish, or all of the fish that meet a particular set of search parameters that have been provided. Either way, the controller is just taking that request, passing it off to the right model, and then the model knows how to pull that information out of the database and pass it back as a structured data set. And then the controller passes that data off to the right view that plugs it into that template and makes sure that all of the right data gets put into the right fields. In our system, we use a lot of reusable code, these sort of shared interface code blocks that allow us to build every search page kind of uses this same thing and then plugs just the right search fields into it. It builds the same pagination thing and just sets the right number depending on how many pages were found or how many results were found, and then always builds the sort thing, but what options go in here depend on the view that was provided. When a template is made, it's passed back to the controller, and then it goes out through this framing code that sort of builds the main set within this header and navigation and footer bar that go on every page. It kind of wraps it in that, and then it goes out as a website. All right, when we move to version 2 of the site later this year, we'll be adding data submission functionality. And as you can see, the design of the site doesn't really change all that much. So the controller will be taught to figure out whether or not people are requesting data or submitting data, and if they're submitting data, to act accordingly. So it'll check whether people are allowed to be submitting data, whether the data that they're submitting is fine, whether there's any issues with it. And if it's okay, then it'll pass it off to the correct model, and then the models have been taught how to create, update, and delete in addition to reading. So it will know how to either create a new record in the database or to update an existing one. And then anyone who has submitted data will just kind of get a landing page back that says it worked or it didn't work. On the view side of things, we've added these set of form pages. Again, these are just different templates that will load up what the appropriate set of form fields are for a fish, for a reference, or for a recording. A lot of that's using the same code that were used to make these search functions in terms of text submissions or little select submissions, and then we'll just kind of extend that to add things like text boxes that we didn't need when we were doing searching. And then when we move beyond that into our next adventure, it's just adding invertebrate species. Again, not a whole lot changes in the overall design. The controller will know how to handle an invertebrate request the same way that it does a fish one, and that's mostly just copying and pasting and then doing some minor modifications. There'll be an invertebrate model that kind of knows how to describe that and pass information in and out. It's notable that that's still connecting to the same reference and recording models because as far as the system is concerned, a reference is just a reference and a recording is just a recording, and then it'll just know to tell you whether it's a reference that was referring to a fish species or to an invertebrate species or perhaps to both, and which ones they were. On the view side of things, there's more of a set of choices that we have to make that we've not really figured out exactly how we want to do it yet. But either way, it's not that much of a complication. Either we will add a set of invertebrate forms and pages that sort of mimic the fish one and just have a different set of search parameters as they need. Or if it turns out that the metadata of invertebrates and fish is like sufficiently similar that we really can get it all in one search page, then we might abstract the fish one up to just be an animal search, and then there'll be a field that lets you determine whether you're interested in just things under fish, just things under invertebrates. I mean, in some ways you can do that through taxa already. And then on the recordings and references, it's notable that we have kind of two options of what we can present on the site. We could present everything as one set of reference search pages that has a filter here that lets you say, I only want to see invertebrate references, I only want to see fish references, or I want to see both. Or we can split things and take you to two different reference pages, one of which will only pull fish records and one of which will only pull invertebrate records. But you'll notice that this doesn't really change anything here because as far as the system's concerned, these are the same. So whichever model we end up going with, it will actually be the exact same thing. It'll just be a matter of whether you can see a filter here to switch between invertebrate and fish, or whether it's pre-selected and hidden, and then you just get two different links depending on which one you're interested in. The system doesn't really care. All right, and then the next stage we know about so far, the next thing to highlight is we've also gone with a model that keeps the data and files separate from the delivery system, the website delivery. So the same data set is being run through one set of models and controllers and views to produce FishSounds.net, but the same data set will be run through a kind of different set of models and controllers and views to produce FishSounds Educate, which is a site that will kind of provide the data in preset bundles for classroom and lab activities, or let people build their own bundles out of little data carts and then download things in bulk. At the end of the day, though, they're both pulling at exactly the same data set and just kind of manipulating it in different ways because that's what they need to do to deliver their end. We think there's kind of three big advantages to this design. So the first one is that we have simplified our system administration and security concerns. The data only exists in one place, and we can kind of lock that down and let in just little pinholes to allow these sites that we know should be able to access it, and that kind of keeps it the most secure. It keeps all of the data across the websites in sync. So when we get to the point that we are accepting user submissions through FishSounds and we have a recording that's submitted and approved, then it will instantly become available in FishSounds Educate because it's ending up in the same database and that's looking the same thing. There's no sort of delay as things need to get moved around or things are falling out of sync. And our third is in much the same way that we can pivot and quickly add FishSounds Educate when we determine that there are other needs that this data set could deliver on, we'll be able to add additional sort of nodes off of this. To really quickly provide new things that the community needs or that we can figure out are useful uses of the data. So that concludes our sort of technical walkthrough of the tools that exists and will exist in the near future. For any further explanation or questions or just to connect to our team, we can be reached by email. I hope you enjoyed this explanation of our tool.